The most popular FPS game in the world has been around since 2003 and has over 20 installments to the franchise. This has created the developers to have many innovations over the years. And yes, I'm talking about Call of Duty. And whether you love or hate this series, you know that Call of Duty 1 in 2003 is nothing like Modern Warfare 3 in 2023. You and I are here to take a look back at the biggest innovations in Call of Duty history to help break down how the games became better and worse through the years. The beginning of COD was a time when the developers were just figuring out how to create quality shooter games, with the only true big innovation happening in COD 3 with the addition of sprinting, something that is obviously needed in every FPS game. After the first few titles got Call of Duty on the map, COD 4 started the rise of the franchise. You could even say ascend Call of Duty into the best-selling game. The first thing that changed was the title itself, Modern Warfare. It was one of the first FPS games to be set in the modern era instead of World War II, which immediately set it apart. This allowed for the story to have different threats, individual villains instead of just huge armies, and the threat of nuclear warfare, giving the story big stakes. But the true game changers all happened within the multiplayer. COD 4 arguably had the most innovations in the entire franchise, which is what helped Call of Duty get a leg up on the other games. It was built to be an arcade shooter, which gave the game much smaller maps than any other FPS at the time. It even added the smallest map in COD history, Shipment, by accident. Shipment was a map that the developers used to test out things in a 1v1 setting. Yep, that's what it was designed for, so no shock that the spawns weren't very good. And when they released COD 4, they actually forgot to take it out of the map rotation, and it was much more difficult to update games back then, so they just left it in, and it became one of the most iconic maps ever. But that's not all they did with the maps. They also invented the 3-lane map design, which became a staple for Call of Duty and something that most fans loved, as this style did a good job of giving maps a good flow to choke points that allowed for different playstyles, instead of just having random nooks and crannies to camp in all over the map. Next, they added the Create a Class system, where instead of only having default classes to pick from, you, the player, could pick to run whatever combination of weapons, attachments, perks, and equipment you wanted. This made the game have a more personable experience that made you have more control over what you wanted to play like. And the next huge thing they added were kill streaks, with a UAV, airstrike, and helicopter, which gave players rewards for doing well in the game. And I think kill streaks is the single biggest thing that sets Call of Duty multiplayer apart from other FPS games, because it's the only series with them. And they made sure to make the biggest streak a good one. This way you'd want to keep playing and keep earning a helicopter. Yet another innovation was adding some basic camo challenges for weapons that encourage you to try out all the weapons instead of just using the best ones. Then they only allowed you to get gold camo on a couple weapons, making it feel special to unlock. But they made sure you couldn't easily get and keep everything you unlocked if you were a completionist, because they added the prestige system, where when you hit max level, you could choose to reset to level 1 and need to re-unlock everything, but you got a cool new symbol next to your name. It's amazing when you look back at all the things one Call of Duty title added, and it's easy to see why the franchise made a huge leap heading into World at War, which definitely didn't do as many things as COD 4, but had arguably the most important addition in the entire series with zombies. And it unlocked in the most terrifying and unexpected way. When World at War was first released, you had to complete the darkest campaign in Call of Duty history, which technically had multiple endings, but not to the level of later Call of Duties, where we will discuss that a little bit more. And as you completed this campaign, you roll straight into the credits until your screen slowly transitioned to a crashed plane in a field as your soldier is laying on the ground next to it, until a zombie comes full sprinting at your face, screen to black, and round 1 of your zombies experience begins to maniacal laughter. As a child, this freaked me out, and World at War would go on to add everything we know and love today about zombies with the mystery box, traps, perks, characters, and the Aether story. And while this isn't the peak of zombies for Call of Duty, it is the most important zombies for Call of Duty, because without it, we would never have had it. Let's transition back to modern times with Modern Warfare 2, the sequel to COD 4, which pushed the boundaries of Call of Duty once again, just like its predecessors. It took a new philosophy of making everything overpowered, which makes everything balanced. And while that technically wasn't true, it did amplify the fun and frustration, which has made it one of the most memorable and favorite games in the community. Please hit the like button. COD 4 created perks, and MW2 created pro perks, which were unlocked via challenges that gave the perks an extra component, like Commando made you knife people from across the map. But when you got it pro, it also gave you no fall damage, which allowed for some crazy sniper montages. Oh, and subscribe, because at 100K, I'm doing a face reveal. And where COD 4 created kill streaks, MW2 created kill streak selection, where instead of just having a UAV, airstrike, and a helicopter of dogs, you had a selection between 15 of them. And they didn't just make the weapons and perks overpowered, they also did that with the streaks like the Harrier Strike, Pavlo, Chopper Gunner, and AC-130, which all led to the most recognizable kill streak in all of Call of Duty, the Nuke. But it didn't just add good things, it added death streaks, the first thing Call of Duty ever added to protect bad players specifically. We've all had streaks ruined by Painkiller or Final Stand. It was upsetting. It's too traumatic to think about, so let's switch over to a new period with the Cold War and Vietnam War with Black Ops 1. The best-selling Call of Duty in the franchise with 31 million copies sold. This was technically the peak of Call of Duty with Black Ops 1. It didn't do too much to innovate with zombies, but it really just took what World at War did on all its maps and combined them together to give you the full experience that created a community of its own in COD solely focused on zombies, and the Aether story that became so much more fleshed out. The way they told the story in the campaign was far different from other CODs because they went back and forth in time instead of telling a linear story, which played well into their mind-bending thriller of Mind Control. But the real additions happened in multiplayer, where they added COD points, not the ones you know about today where you have to purchase them to then get crappy microtransactions. Yuck. But points you earned while playing, which allowed you to buy weapons, perks, attachments, and camos, which played perfectly into their new wager match system, where you bet COD points, and if you finished top 3, you at least made your COD points back. And in these wager matches, you played party games, which were brand new at the time with sticks and stones, one in the chamber, gun game, and sharpshooter. This was a great way to make matches mean more, but also just be fun with the reward to be able to unlock more things by winning. Then with their prestige system, they locked gold camo behind reaching 14th prestige and costing 50,000 COD points. This whole system never coming back is wild to me because of how much fun it was and giving reasons for people to keep playing the game. And I suppose another change was BO1 made the weapons more difficult to use, requiring players to have just a little bit more skill. The weapons in general had more recoil than the previous Call of Duties, and the snipers weren't as easy to quickscope with. It actually required some practice to be good with, and that's why I loved the L96A1, because it wasn't ridiculously easy to use. It made me respect the people who quickscoped, instead of it just being a shotgun with infinite range. Let's fast forward to Modern Warfare 3, where a new mode was created in Survival, which was within Spec Ops, which was Infinity Ward's first attempt at something like zombies. It was round-based with increasingly difficult waves of soldiers, which you could play on all the different multiplayer maps. It was fun, but it wasn't anywhere near Treyarch Zombies. And MW3 did an amazing thing by saying,
"No last stand. You last stand."
That got everyone hyped, but then they decided to keep Final Stand as a death streak and innovate a new one in Dead Man's Hand. 1 step forward and 2 back. Like, come on, man. Who thought that was a good idea? MW3 multiplayer was extremely similar to MW2 with almost all the same weapons and kill streaks, but where they changed it up was by making them point streaks, where capping an objective would count as 1 point towards your streak, the same value as a kill. And then they created the support and specials package as well. Support streaks just meant it didn't matter if you died, you just need a certain amount of points in the match and you'd earn the streaks, which was an effective way to support your team with things like ballistic vests and advanced UAVs. But the specials package was their greatest innovation, where you earned an extra perk every 2 kills until you hit 8 and you got every single pro perk in the game. You felt unstoppable once you got to the 8-point streak, and was what everyone would run if they were going for the new nuke, the Moab, which now was a 25 or 24 gun streak with specialists because you got hardline. MW3's main change was just becoming a slightly more balanced MW2. Let's travel to Black Ops 2, the most popular Call of Duty in the series according to your votes in my community tournament. It's popular because it had so many new ideas that just worked. It was the first campaign to truly have multiple endings with the ability to change who lives and dies while having multiple and vastly different ending outcomes. We need this in more COD campaigns. And then for zombies, it tried changing up the way we played with transit and using a bus to get around the map. It could have been so much better if it wasn't on the old gen consoles. It took too much power to render the map, and to prevent lag and stuttering, they added the fog and denizens. But even with that, I still enjoyed it. Then they also created a new mode in Grief where 2 teams tried to out-survive the other one in zombies by griefing the other players. Not my favorite mode, but a cool addition. But the huge changes happened in multiplayer. With a brand new created class system with the Pick 10, this allowed players to have more perks, more attachments, less equipment, less weapons, or whatever you wanted to do. It allowed there to be far more customization in your classes. And next, Black Ops 2 made score streaks where everything you did counted towards earning your streaks. Now assists counted, grabbing a tag and kill confirm counted, defending a flag and domination got you more score, and this all led to people playing the objective more so they could earn more rewards. It was the perfect system. Then they created a new mastery camo with diamond camo, which was unlocked by getting gold for every gun in a weapon class. And of course, they created League Play, which still to this day is the best ranked mode in COD. It allowed you to choose if you wanted to play casually in pubs or play in competitive sweaty matches, which is one of the reasons everyone loves it. You got the choice to play how you want, instead of the game and devs choosing for you. Black Ops 2 is a hard game to follow up, which is why Ghost tried to add new things into Call of Duty. Infinity Ward made a brand new third mode in Extinction, which felt like a mix of zombies and Spec Ops. You fought aliens and had objectives to complete until you successfully could exfil. It was cool, but it was nowhere near Treyarch zombies. And for multiplayer, they tried to make dynamic maps, kind of like Battlefield, but to a way smaller scale by only having basically one thing per map you could destroy or move. And they added field orders that would give you an objective that if you completed, you got a kill streak, and they even had map exclusive kill streaks like Michael Myers. This was a super cool feature that should come back into COD. And of course they added sliding into Call of Duty, but not like you know today because there was no slide canceling. The last thing Ghost switched up was the class system with the perks specifically that gave you 8 points to pick between your perks of different values. Some were worth 1 point and others that cost you 5, and if you removed a secondary lethal or tactical grenade, you would be able to add 1 point to your perks, and this allowed for far more customization and is a system I'd like to see come back. Continuing to Advanced Warfare, this is where COD made a huge leap in multiplayer. Pun intended. It is set in the future and added new technology into the world with exosuits that played a part in all 3 of its modes. For zombies, it was definitely unique to AW only and was interesting, but outside of the new movement, it felt like a watered down version of Treyarch zombies. And with multiplayer, it created a larger skill gap with the jerky movement of using the double jump or dashing to the side, which could be why they added strict skill-based matchmaking for the first time in Call of Duty, which is one of the reasons some people dislike this game. And with this new movement, they tried to create the maps to take advantage of the movement by making them have way more verticality than normal COD maps. It worked on some and not on others. I did like the new game mode they added in Uplink that worked beautifully with the exosuits. But what most people remember from Advanced Warfare is those supply drops that were so controversial because they added in weapon variants that changed the stats of the weapons for the first time in COD history. I never bought a single supply drop, so I never got the ASM-1 Speakeasy, the Bal 27 Obsidian Seed, but hey, it certainly made COD a boatload of money, which is why as we transition to Black Ops 3, they still had supply drops in the game, but instead of variants, it was brand new weapons. The supply drops became one of the most controversial things in COD history, with a debate on it being pay to win. The only thing Black Ops 3 improved with supply drops was that none of the new weapons were far better than the base weapons, making it not a huge disadvantage to not have the weapons, like it was a disadvantage to not have the good variants in Advanced Warfare. And the multiplayer for Black Ops 3 didn't do too much to innovate, it mainly just refined what Advanced Warfare was trying to do. It had much smoother movement with a gradual boost instead of just jerking your character in a direction, and then it added wall running. And the maps were much better because they allowed for people to use the advanced movement if they wanted, but they also worked great if you just wanted to keep your boots on the ground, which is why I think BO3 was so loved. And of course they added specialists, which essentially were just like support score streaks because you'd earn them no matter what, and I thought they could be a little annoying, but overall, they were just a good time. With its campaign, BO3 tried to take the zombies approach of needing to research the story on YouTube for hours to understand it, but it didn't work because with the campaign, the story is why you play it, and with zombies, the story is secondary and optional if you're just super invested into the mode. But they more than made up for this with the most popular zombies in COD. They created gobblegums, which would give players power-ups when they consume them that could help make the game easier if you wanted a little bit of help. The biggest and greatest thing Black Ops 3 added was its zombies mods on PC, which allowed the community to build and release maps, giving the game an infinite lifespan and unlimited maps for people to play. Unfortunately, it was only for PC, so most of the community didn't get to experience it, but they need to bring back this feature. And what the community didn't want to come back in 2016 was advanced movement, which is why Infinite Warfare Warfare had the most disliked trailer ever, but the game wasn't bad and improved the weapon unlock system over what Advanced Warfare and Black Ops 3 did. IW tried to make a BO3 clone, but with a space theme that other futuristic CODs didn't do, and I think it worked perfectly for the campaign, which had the most character deaths of any Call of Duty story. Then with Zombies, Infinite Warfare took what Treyarch did, but gave it a lighter tone, and it made the zombies a little more silly, and it worked to perfection. All their maps were based off movies, giving unique locations with a theme park, rave, and space station as a few examples. This is widely considered the best non-Treyarch zombies, and it should be. Overall, Infinite Warfare made a few changes, but the ones it did make were good. But can the same be said for COD World War II? After the community's quick dismissal of Infinite Warfare, this game was supposed to go back to the basics, which is why it was set in World War II. But this made Sledgehammer think we wanted ordinary soldiers, and they slowed down the multiplayer a lot at launch. We'll get into this more in a little. I want to go into some good things Sledgehammer did. The headquarters was a great change that gave a social place for players to run around in before searching for a match. It allowed you to call in your supply drops in front of your friends so you could all see what you got. It also had a 1v1 pit and was overall just a cool addition. And for zombies, they went for the opposite theme of Infinite Warfare and went for the scariest zombies experience. I think this could have worked out great and was pretty fun with the launch map, but overall, their maps weren't great, which made the mode not as popular as other zombies experiences. But just like IW, I would like to see them try this style out again. And for multiplayer, the main difference was the divisions that affected what perks, weapons, and more that you could run. For example, at launch, you could only use a bayonet if you used the infantry division. This system was far too limiting, but they did fix it about halfway through the game and made it way better. COD World War II tried to go old school, which led to Black Ops 4 trying out something completely different. They started off by having no campaign and creating the first Call of Duty Battle Royale in Blackout, which, to be fair, wasn't Treyarch's decision. It was Activision's, forcing them to create a BR to compete with Fortnite, but then they didn't make it free to play, which is why Blackout wasn't as big as it should have been. Then for Zombies, they started a new storyline with the Chaos story, which I don't think got enough appreciation because people were upset the Aether story was done. They also changed the HUD, which was a little bit too large and covered up too much of the screen, but they did a great job with the maps, soundtrack, and atmosphere. And for multiplayer, they changed up the experience a lot, but still managed to make it feel like Call of Duty. The big changes were changing the health to 150 instead of 100, which made Black Ops 4 have the highest TTK in COD history, then having to stem to regain health and switching to 5v5 instead of 6v6 to account for the slower time to kill. But they kept the faster pace of COD by not having any truly big maps, which kept the action constant still. Black Ops 4 arguably had the most changes of any Call of Duty, but is still the last classic styled game, because when we went to MW 2019, they sold the game with the Modern Warfare name, but then made the game feel far different from the previous MW titles. We will start with multiplayer, where they went with the Advanced Warfare matchmaking approach, but made the skill-based matchmaking even stricter. The developers of MW 2019 was a new Infinity Ward, as most of the old team had left by this time, and they wanted to completely cater their game to bad players. When they were asked if their changes to help challenged players would hurt the dedicated fans, they pretty much said that wasn't their goal, but that yes, they would affect the dedicated players, and they didn't care. On top of the strict skill-based matchmaking added, they abandoned the 3-lane map design Call of Duty is known for and went with a completely different, unbalanced design. They were also quoted saying they wanted safe spaces on the maps where bad players could feel safe. It's an FPS game. You don't play it to feel safe. It's also the first COD to have doors on every map, which they used to help with their safe space concept. Doors can be fine, but they seemed a bit too excessive within this multiplayer. They wanted to make the game slower paced, and they achieved that goal. MW 2019 also added gunfight into multiplayer, which was a great addition and was basically a slightly worse version of face-off playlists from the original MW3. The best thing this game added to Call of Duty was the gunsmith, which took the place of the pick 10 system. And for movement, it added slide canceling and bunny hopping by complete mistake, but the community loved these additions. The gunsmith made the selecting of perks and equipment have fewer options, but it gave building of your primary and secondary weapons way more customization. It was a give and take, but I think it worked great, especially for Warzone, because you could add 5 attachments onto all your weapons, and the reason this was great for Warzone is because they added loadouts to BR, which is a change most COD players enjoyed, and the 5 attachments were so helpful because in BR AscendAR, you have way more scenarios that you're going to be fighting in with a huge map and more elevated areas. And Warzone became insanely popular for a couple reasons. First, they learned from Blackout that they need to make the Battle Royale mode free to compete with Fortnite. And second, the pandemic started and kept everyone at home, which put more people on video games, and the rest is history. As we travel to Black Ops Cold War, we had Warzone continued with just a little bit of an update to Verdansk by making it Verdansk 84. And everything else pretty much stayed the same other than Rebirth Island and the Resurgence mode being added. But this was just a copy from Black Ops 4 Blackout Resurgence mode, where they had the map Alcatraz, which Rebirth was a copy of. Then the campaign added back and multiple endings just like Treyarch has done before. And multiplayer brought back the higher quality of maps without save spaces that greatly improved the experience again. The only other big change for multiplayer was one I didn't like too much with their score streak system. They essentially turned everything into support streaks from MW3, where it didn't matter if you died, it only mattered if you gained enough points overall in the game. It also made it nearly impossible to earn big streaks more than once in a game. Then they added the air patrol in for a cheap cost that destroyed all big streaks in 2 seconds. This system and individual streak were created to protect bad players, a common theme of new Call of Duties. Then Cold War Zombies may have had less inspiring maps, but it made up for it with great innovations to the mechanics in Zombies, which is why some call Cold War Zombies a mechanical masterpiece. They divided weapon strength into 5 tiers from default to legendary. You could also select a field upgrade prior to the match, which was a less OP version of Specialist in Black Ops 4 Zombies. And they created a brand new perk system that allows you to get every perk in the game, but with each upgrade costing more. Zombies is all about gathering more power as you go farther into the rounds, and this system worked perfectly for that. Those were the most important changes to mechanics, but then they also added a new mode in Outbreak, which essentially removes rounds and gives the player tasks or objectives instead. I prefer round-based to Outbreak, but I'll never complain about extra content. With that, we move to Vanguard, where I will only be talking about a couple things. And with multiplayer, it actually did make a great innovation that I would like to see come back with different paced playlists. This would allow you to pick if you wanted to play on smaller maps with more players. This was called blitz pacing, or have matches with less players on normal size maps, and this was called tactical pacing as 2 examples. This is perfect because it allows people to choose how they want to play. Then they also allowed you to put on as many attachments as you wanted instead of just 5, which they tried to balance out by having each attachment do less. Not really a positive or negative addition. Then for Zombies, I don't really want to get into it because whatever they did was bad and I barely played it outside of the Shino Numa remake. Then the other big changes they made were creating Fortune's Keep for Resurgence mode and Caldera for Battle Royale. And Caldera got a bunch of hate because the map didn't work on consoles at launch, which put a sour taste in many people's mouth. But they added a bunch of movement onto the map, allowing for a faster paced Battle Royale, with balloons being the biggest addition. And I personally enjoyed Caldera a lot, but that's probably because I had become way better at Warzone by that point, and I set all my personal records on it. And Fortune's Keep was a cool change of pace from Rebirth Island, even if it wasn't quite as good. And after Vanguard, people weren't happy with COD, even though I personally enjoyed this year for Warzone. And they tried to bring hype back to the community with the Modern Warfare name with MW2, which did well for their sales figures, but the changes they made were taking everything good MW 2019 did out and keeping everything bad MW 2019 did in. It was a bold strategy, with examples being the movement and weapons being taken out, and if you remember, the movement in MW 2019 was a mistake, so what they did with MW2 is what they wanted to do to begin with, and it wasn't a popular change. Then they kept in the poor map design, save spaces, and boatloads of doors. But the biggest changes they made were to the gunsmith and Warzone. With the gunsmith, they added weapon tuning, which some liked, but I think it made an extra step in class setups that just wasn't necessary. Oh, and I somehow almost forgot their weapon and attachment unlock system, where you had to use gun A to unlock gun F to get gun W to unlock a red dot for gun A. A completely convoluted system that just wanted to make things complicated for no reason. And with Warzone 2, the movement change was a huge negative, along with the map Al Masr being a big downgrade from everything in Warzone 1. But Ashika Island was a very good Resurgence map, and the most popular thing MW2 did was the DMZ mode, which allowed you to go around and loot rare items with the threat of AI and real players as you tried to exfil and keep the loot you found. It's not my kind of mode, but one I can appreciate and say was a good addition to Call of Duty. And while MW2 was originally reported to be a 2-year life cycle, they ended up cutting it short and having MW3 released in COD's normal yearly cycle, which had many people calling it a DLC because every launch map was an OG MW2 map, which is weird for a game called MW3 because it would have made more sense to have them all be original Modern Warfare 3 maps. if that was what they planned. But MW3 did have good changes to the multiplayer by drastically improving the movement, taking out the weapon tuning, and having weapons perform more similarly to MW 2019. But one of the main complaints with this game is the campaign, and its new innovation of open combat missions, which felt more like filler than a good addition. Because Sledgehammer was forced to scrap their campaign idea of doing a side story within the Modern Warfare universe to make a direct sequel to MW2's campaign. And this gave them only 6 months to make it, which explains why the campaign was so short and had these missions in it. But arguably their biggest change was making a Zombies and DMZ hybrid, which many people find to be fun and definitely has some good aspects to it, but only having one map for Zombies limits the replayability for me. And of course they changed up the Warzone map with its improved movement that makes it feel like a hybrid of Warzone 1 and Warzone 2. But they might have made the skill-based matchmaking even stricter, at least that's what it feels like. And they do have Verdansk, Rebirth Island, and Fortune's Keep scheduled to come back in 2024 alongside Black Ops Gulf War, and it's looking like it should be a great year for Call of Duty. And if you want to see me play and raid every COD multiplayer, click on this video right here. Peace.